Ross Dellinger, this came out earlier this afternoon. The title of the story, the next wave of conference realignment is about survival. Can the Big 12, Pac-12, ACC make it? How the war on the West, the Pac-12 versus the Big 12, may shape college sports landscape. We know that. We've been discussing it with guys who have been in the TV business, network business. Jim Williams had a couple of more nuggets today about Apple Plus and much more. It's not, the story itself is not the breaking news that sets up the next wave, but there were some nuggets. We'll get to the ACC in a minute, which, Paul, I know that the Magnificent Seven, so to speak. In fact, here's Brett McMurphy. Soon after the Dellinger story came out, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, the 2 Carolina schools, 2 Virginia schools are the Magnificent Seven. Magnificent Seven, ACC schools, sources told him. These schools, Ross Dellinger reported, have met in the past several months with lawyers examining grant of rights to determine just how unbreakable it is. The ACC deal we know runs through 2036.
Yeah, let's start on the West before we get into the East.
Let's go left to right.
Yeah. So starting in the West, we've been kind of through this in that, the Pac-10's options, or as Pac-12, but the 10 remaining schools' options are that, you get a TV deal, short grant of rights, and then you hope that things go your way over 5 years, and with a 12-team playoff, and that the teams you have can drum up enough numbers, and that it grows, and what is probably going to be a majority streaming model works. The problem with that is you have to, what did I say, Smokey? Hope that it works.
Yeah.
It is not a tried and true formula because it's based on hope. And they might be too far ahead of the curve. Sometimes you are ahead of the curve. Sometimes it's too far. Sometimes you're right at the good part of it. We don't know where the Pac-12 will be. We have no idea. The other nugget in there was that for SMU and San Diego State in particular, I think it's San Diego State in particular, to join the conference for 2024, they have to be out by July 1st because it's $17 million if they're out by July 1st.
Yep.
It triples if they're out after that. So if you want a deadline on when the Pac-12 is going to expand, they may have to expand to those teams anyway because of that. But now, if you are San Diego State and SMU, you're going to take it and go to the Power 5 league. But if your TV deal is still bad, are you doing the right thing if the league you go to join dissipates? It is interesting.
And Ross also mentioned that even though there are pecking orders of who you might be interested in, the Big 12, of course, everyone, as we have mentioned and have had different guests on the show, those who cover some of the Pac-12 or others who are a part of course, previously or are consultants when it comes to TV network media deals, is that, there's a lot of smoke around Colorado, then maybe Arizona, and then there's the staunch, we're not going anywhere. And then there's, you would think, Washington and Oregon are man, you almost wish, I'm just saying this, just to as a discussion, you wonder if Washington and Oregon, just hope somebody else makes a move. I don't think they're going to be the first ones because where are they going to go? It's not like they're not the most valuable left outside of USC and UCLA leaving, and that could be debatable, but it's almost like they're waiting. But then if somebody else does something, really, they're not going to force themselves into any room. It's just crazy. And Ross Dellinger continues it and even mentioned Yormark. How about this? Can you show the overview of the entire studio, Garrett? Do you not have that? But seriously, they're across the hallway at these meetings. There's the Pac-12 and George Kliavkoff, and then there's the Big 12 and Brett Yormark and all their administrators and some sparring going on. I mean, but we knew that. We talked to Mac Rhodes about it. We talked to those who covered the conferences in Scottsdale just a couple of days ago. They're really across the hallway in this ballroom area where conferences were having these meetings with media people and also with themselves.
Well, you have to play both sides of it, right? You have to prepare for, we're going to have to raid this conference or we're going to have to work with this conference. And raid may not be the right word, but I mean, that's the one I'm going to use. So
What conference has not tried to raid somebody else?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
so it's not like don't get offended by it. Everyone gets offended. Or what conference has not even had flirtation or has flirtation? Everybody has. I mean, it's like paying football players to come to school X, Y, and Z. It was happening. You knew it was happening, and then there were some programs just too stupid to protect themselves from being that way.
Yeah, and so we'll see. I mean, timing's everything, and the Pac-12 has really unfortunate timing. Some of it is their fault, and some of it is just the wheels of history turning right now, and they're on the toughest end of that. Now, look, the other one, and this is maybe even bigger news, at least today, because of what it means. Maybe not immediately, but long term for the ACC, is that on the other side of the country, there are 7 teams in the ACC.
Well, remember we had I don't know if we played the audio, but it was your alma mater, Florida State. They were having a meeting, and they're like saying, "Hey, this is not feasible for us. We got to find a way." But everyone you talk to, even if it's Florida State or Clemson, that they might be able to pay the exit fee. They're not getting out of the grant of rights. They've tried every angle unless something just pops that allows them to leave.
Basically, they'd have to dissolve the conference.
Yes.
And so they have 7 teams. It would take 8 teams to do that because that would be the majority. And here's where it gets tricky. The 7 teams that were mentioned were FSU, who were football powerhouse, Clemson, football powerhouse, Miami, football powerhouse, and those 3 are blue blood programs with multiple national championships.
We're starting to have levels of blue blood. Miami's,
but
yeah, I get
they're in the club, right? I mean, they're in the club.
They get an invitational on occasion to visit college football's version of Augusta National.
Yeah. So they're there, and they are marketable as such, which makes them valuable in spite of their recent 20-year struggles. Then you have UNC, who's just they're big in everything.
Yeah, they're
just a big
one of the better overall
institutions.
Yes.
NC State, who is a big school in North Carolina, who will ride with them, and the 2 Virginia schools, Virginia Tech, who has a really good football history in spite of its recency, and then Virginia, which is a school that is a lot like UNC in that you can't really say that many bad things about it. Like they're not great at football, but they've got a basketball national championship in the last 4 years. They're a big school. They're an excellent academic. It's like there's nothing really bad you can say about them as an institution, as far as their marketability across the board. So you have those 7 schools together that represent a lot of power. And there are a lot of things that they might be willing to take a risk on. Now, it can blow up in their face because of different things. But, for example, if they decided they want to just break up the ACC and make a new conference, which would be the probably only way to get out of the grant of rights, I would think, for 13 years. And to get ESPN to renegotiate, the only power they have with ESPN is they say, like, look, if these 7 schools are not in the ACC, then your ACC network is Wake Forest versus Syracuse.
Right.
And that's not what they wanted. When they wanted Florida State and Clemson and UNC, that's what they wanted overall. And so you have that, but I mean, again, you still have a 13-year grant of rights that you can't just decide like, well, there's enough of us here that we don't like this anymore, without the other ones wanting some financial restitution for that. And you might get, Georgia Tech and Wake Forest to just admit that, like, we're not in this, we can't do this, we can't compete. We will figure out a different way and be in another conference because we're on the short end of the stick. But I don't expect them to go without a fight. And 2, they still are going to need, to make up some money from that. If the other ones are leaving because of money.
If the other schools agree to any kind of earn your money, I understand that's the American way, but if any of those schools do that, they are probably just cutting their throat. Because we saw what happened with other examples of conferences when they've had revenue sharing that was not equal. No matter what, all you do is feed the larger programs' ego even more, and they don't even need that, but then they always seem like they're the most needy. And number 2, how do you fight for something when you're basically, hey, you just stay where you are? And I get that some of it is legacy based on where they have been, how long they've been in a conference. But when you're told you're not as good, then what voice should you have? And so we'll see what happens. It's a lot of fun. One of the arguments about everything we've just mentioned is whether Miami is a blue blood. Miami has some making up to do. Nebraska has some making up to do. Florida State won within the last 10 years, and last year they were very good. But there are some, like Nebraska's all-time numbers are unbelievable. They're not saying that because I'm a Huskers fan. Miami, though, has the 4 national titles. And, heck, they've played for a couple more. I lost to Penn State one year, and I think lost to Nebraska one year. So that's a great debate in itself, just in itself. I don't know what's going to happen. We have tried to look at this from every possible angle imaginable, and even now, another week goes by, and you'll see more stories this week. We might have some of them ourselves, but we try to at least position what we can. But I got to tell you, man, if every story that was out there became true, there'd be 915 scenarios that would have happened.
Okay, here's my question for the Magnificent Seven in the ACC. We kind of know what plan A and B are, right? We kind of know what those are. Is to find your way into more money, probably in a different conference where you're not playing the smaller schools that are holding you back. But what's plan, let's just call it F, like when you get down and those options aren't available to all of you or all of you together? What are the plans as you go down the list to check off of what can and can't happen? Because, what if only 3 of those schools are attractive to other conferences? What if, and the other thing is, okay, so if you blow the whole thing up, then what do the other conferences do? What schools would interest the Big 12 in going east to pair with some of their schools that they have in the East?
In the ACC?
Yeah,
what conference would not want Florida State?
Well, I'm talking about aside from the aside from the.
And there might be there might be a couple that they're for other reasons that maybe a team or two they're not. Yeah, you're really really good. You're going to end up in the right place, but you're not going to be with us.
Now I know that there is a lot of scuttlebutt about when Florida State joined the ACC that Florida would have kept them out of the SEC, and that very well may have been possible at that time, but when they were given the option and they asked Bobby Bowden where he wanted to go, he had a lot more sway of the situation and said, well, we could be in the ACC and keep doing exactly what we're doing and getting better and better and better and not having to play those teams all the time. And at that time, it was the right decision. It was a great decision. They've won 3 national championships because of it. They've played in 3 or 4 other national championship games because of that decision. They were in the conversation for 20 years, but things have changed now, so I don't know what they want to do, but it wouldn't